Many fear that AI will replace certain roles in the AEC industry. So how do you see AI enhancing human expertise and creativity? And then what opportunities does this open up for professionals in the industry?
Yeah, there's no question that there's going to be some low-hanging fruit, especially with the rise of artificial general intelligence in the next maybe 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. And that's going to include marketing positions, anything involving writing or spec writing, as well as on the architectural and engineering side, drafting. That said, for the vast majority of design professionals, it's going to save time.
Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. The AEC industry is undergoing a major transformation, and AI is at the center of this revolution. As professionals, we're always seeking ways to enhance our skills, streamline workflows, and stay ahead of the curve. But have you ever wondered how AI can augment our expertise and take our projects to the next level? In this episode, I delve into a thought-provoking discussion with Randy Deutsch, FAIA, Lead AP, and Clinical Associate Professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, about how AI is reshaping the way we design, build, and operate. From automation and data-driven decision-making to the evolving role of creativity, we'll also explore what AI means for the future of AEC professionals and how we can harness its potential to drive meaningful innovation. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, it's now time for our conversation of the week with Randy Deutsch. Randy, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's great to be with you.
So, Randy, we admittedly don't have a ton of architects on the show, so I'm actually really excited to dive in and talk to you, because you're going to give a different perspective, I think, than our usual trend of guests, but we'll jump right in. So, Randy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your journey across architecture, education, and emerging technologies has shaped your perspective on AI's role in the AEC education and practice?
Absolutely. And thank you for having a different perspective on your podcast. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so my background is in architecture. I come from a practice-based career. So while I'm a full-time academic now and have been for the last 23 years, I practiced architecture for 35, overlapping with that time. And I think that probably more than anything has shaped the way I look at software, the way I look at technology, the way that I look at soft skills, mindsets, attitudes within the industry, and how to better move things forward. I treated my career as an experiment. So I created this thing with successive sigmoid curves. Every 7 years, I would have a side gig of some sort. So I started off always as an architect, but I'd start off with a side gig in first cartooning and then playwriting. But then I moved into urban design, serving as a professor, writing books, international public speaker. And my most recent side gig, I'm 6 years into a 7-year side gig career, is in AI research. And I don't see these things as like radically different approaches. A side gig can relieve things when things slow down during an economic downturn, and they help to inform what I'm doing in practice. So going back to the soft skills just for a second, in response to the question, my focus has been on attitudes and mindsets and soft skills, much more than the IT side of things. And that's led to a couple of my books like Convergence and Super Users. In other words, what I'm looking at is who do we need to be as design, architecture and engineering professionals to move the ball forward within our professions and industry.
And Randy, I'm looking at the book right now, so I'll give my recommendation for Super Users. So written pre-pandemic, right?
Absolutely, 2019.
So right before I picked it up, maybe within the past year or two, and I will say like I was telling you earlier, like when I finished it, I thought, I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. So if you are listening and are someone who's really interested in this type of content on podcast, pick up Randy's book. It's called Super Users. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And, but Randy, as we know, things change pretty quickly, right? So your book written 5 going on 6 years. So a lot of things have changed then. I think one being the advent of AI. And I think many fear that AI will replace certain roles in the AEC industry. So how do you see AI enhancing human expertise and creativity? And then what opportunities does this open up for professionals in the industry?
Yeah, there's no question that there's going to be some low-hanging fruit, especially with the rise of artificial general intelligence in the next maybe 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. And that's going to include marketing positions, anything involving writing or spec writing, as well as on the architectural and engineering side, drafting. That said, for the vast majority of design professionals, it's going to save time. And one of the bigger problems we're going to have as design professionals is what do we do with that time? You know, you can do more work, you can do different work, you can do work that's higher detailed, can have, which my current cohort of students at the university would really like to hear, work-life integration or work-life balance. So saving time is going to be something that comes out of, or is drawn out of this idea of the rise of AI. But the second thing that I think is a huge opportunity for us as architects and engineers is that it enables us, enables us to address new problems, intractable or wicked problems, like climate crisis and social and racial justice, as well as, dealing with affordable housing and migration in our industry. All these things have to be addressed, and AI help us with that. I'd say one more thing that is an opportunity, and that is, in real time, up until this week, I've been focused on how AI replaces tasks that we do as engineers and as architects. So that sees us working in individual silos. But the shift that we're seeing with the rise of the more intelligent versions of large language models and even image generators and many of the other AI tools available to us, we have to, and I think it was Ethan Malik who originated this kind of thinking, that we need to augment our capabilities more than look at automating our individual tasks. And so I'm part of that wave right now that's trying to look at how AI can augment what it is we already do so we can do it better.
And Randy, I really like that approach. And to answer your question, what do we do with all that extra time? We can think about how we can augment our abilities, because it's right. It's easy to say, hey, we can save X billable hours on Y task, and here's the return. It's a little bit harder to say, okay, now that I have more time to think, like, what new business models could I be exploring, right?
Exactly.
How can I augment my existing skill set? So I'm all about it. And I think like just having more time to breathe and think is a really good start that I don't know that most of us have the luxury to do, but hopefully there are tools and initiatives that can really start to help people out on that front. So then Randy, moving back to kind of this intersection of practice and education that you've really been the expert in now, bringing in AI and technology. So how is AI transforming AEC education and training? Then what skills should students and professionals developing to stay ahead?
So I just completed a graduate level AI studio at the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, where I've been teaching for 13 years. And it was an incredible experience. It was also incredibly unusual. I've written about this, uploaded to various channels, my experience and research on this. But instead of having a lottery system where the students opted in, so in other words, students who are already predisposed to work in AI or already, wanted to work in AI, the school itself hand-selected 13 students for this graduate studio, the majority of whom were undergraduates, 19 or 20 years old, were international students where English was not their first language, and therefore they also didn't have much of a background in architecture. And so talk about experiments. So AI made them, in just 15 weeks, radically better versions of themselves. And that's really what you want AI to do in a studio. So number one, when I've seen AI studios, as well as just people uploading images over the last 2.5 years since the first versions in November 2022 of these image generators came out, there's an overemphasis on image generators and the images. And this goes for studios as well. So I think the key thing here, it's not that the images are bad. I think there's some really interesting imagery going on. It just has nothing to do with solving these intractable problems that we have in our industry. It's not moving the ball forward. It's not making any of us more comfortable working with tools. So instead of being focused on cool images, something, by the way, at least I can speak for architects, we did particularly well before AI. Why are we using AI to do what we already do really well? What we need to do and focus on leveraging AI in the AEC industry, especially in higher education, is work on our level of curiosity and asking better questions. Especially, we're focusing on how to write better prompts, for example. A lot of times, just the thinking that goes into that is better. I love to use this analogy where up until now, we've been using large language models almost like a version of Google search. And where AI is headed is less about giving us really super quick responses. And what we're seeing with AI in these higher level versions of large language models is that they will delay a response. It seems like forever. It might be 30 or 45 seconds, but it's thinking. And during that time, it's actually coming up with better, more targeted answers for us. And we should take a lesson from that and, do a better job of kind of zeroing in on what's really needed by others. The last thing I'd say is about architectural education in particular, I can't speak for the engineering school on our campus or elsewhere, is this idea of academic freedom. So part of the issue, unlike design or engineering professionals, you can't tell an academic what to think or what to teach. That's what academic freedom is really about, especially if you're tenured. So what I try to do, and it's a little unusual, not being a tenured professor myself, I sort of have one foot in practice and one foot in education, is to make recommendations. This is what I see on the horizon and lately on our doorsteps. And, it would behoove everybody to put a little bit of attention into what we're about to face.
And Randy, that's really well said. I think you would probably find engineering education to be somewhat similar, just based on some of my own experiences going through school. And, for anyone that's not aware, so Randy's distinction between like these models or this AI that's just a faster form of Google search, or ones that kind of take a little longer to seem like they're thinking and then responding. Look at, chain of thought models. But the idea being that, for example, like OpenAI's O1 Pro, O3 Mini, O3 Mini High, they're more intelligent and will show you the steps or the chain of thought that it's going through to actually produce the answer. Oh, and here's where I was going. Deep Research, which just became available recently to users not on the Pro tier. It's pretty amazing. I would just recommend anyone, just try it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. So, but if you're interested, there's plenty of resources out there to help you out. So I think, Randy, then the next question involves, I think, some of the practical use cases, because, everyone's got access to a large language model. Maybe you're paying $20 a month. But when it comes to practical use cases, maybe tools developed for the AEC profession, what tools are currently making the biggest impact in AEC, and how can firms better structure their data to maximize the value of the technologies? Because I think if you're kind of in the space and following a lot of this, that data is a big piece of it before you can even start to talk about AI using the data.
Sure. So this may be, this isn't wiggling out of, an excellent question at all. But and I hate caveats more than anybody. But that said, I've written and published 6 books in the last decade, and they're all on technology. And I know this is the primary interest, or among the primary interests, of your viewers and listeners of the podcast. That said, one thing you have to do as a book author, books take 10 months just to produce by the time you submit beyond the proposal, the actual text of the book, is you have to think about the technology on a higher level. You just mentioned Deep Research. You mentioned OpenAI's O1 and O3. Even if this podcast, I know this is a little meta, comes out in 1 month or 2 months from now, it's very possible there'll be even, future versions of those things. And it's not just worrying about being obsolete, right? We can have discussions about Ecotech and Safari that get usurped within other tools. They still exist, but maybe not by name within various tools. So that said, I think it's actually much more important right now. So this is literally talking about when you and I, Nick, right now are talking versus like even a week ago, that instead of thinking, as I mentioned a moment before, instead of thinking about individual tasks where each type of engineer or each, each person who has a deep specialization wants to leverage AI to solve their particular problems. Where we are right now is thinking about it, and here's a $1 million word, in a way that's transdisciplinary. So where it's architects and engineers together. On Friday of this week, I'm going to be speaking in our architecture firm. I do this very frequently for a lot of organizations and firms. Well, I'll be speaking about AI, and this is a particular firm where it's an architecture firm that works with or is owned by a construction company. And it's really important that we don't, use AI to solve architectural problems versus construction problems, right? So just to use parametric tools as an analogy here, it's like when we have architects doing design models, and then you throw it over the fence to the contractor, they toss out the design model and they create a constructability model. Using AI, which, if you don't mind me using the analogy, to think differently than design professionals, whether architects or engineers, it actually crosses the boundary, and it goes across the boundary and can think like an architect and engineer at the same time in trying to find the commonalities. So we haven't exhausted large language models and what they can do for us. We're going to continue to come up with better and better questions. I think image generators in general are overrated. I think they're fun to play with. What I had my students do last semester is not be afraid of the fact that these image generators hallucinate, or even that the LLMs hallucinate, but actually look to the hallucinations. This may be an unusual thing for an engineer to hear, but it's almost like a Freudian slip. Look to the hallucinations as opportunities to both move the ball forward within the problem that you are addressing, but also to have agency. So in other words, AI needs us, design professionals, engineers, and architects, for various reasons. And I can get to that in a moment. But what it primarily needs for us to do is continue to have agency and not give that up. And so when it hallucinates or starts making things up, or even provides us with either unethical or wrong information, we have an opportunity to step in and either correct it, reframe our question, or start off in a different direction.
And Ray, to quote Professor Malik again, right? Like he's written about this before, but I think I read something recently where the best users and testers of artificial intelligence are subject matter experts in whatever you're trying to use the tool for, because you can tell when something's not right. Now, I made a joke to a colleague. I was like, hey, maybe it's just trying to test us and keep us honest, right? And see what we could do. But I think you're right, because the industry needs us to be testing and using these things, because who else is better positioned than the experts in whatever area they're an expert in?
Yeah, and I think this is what you're saying, but not to be cynical, it might be training off of us by putting just random answers out there and having us correct them. And therefore it's training and going off a better direction.
That's very meta within itself, but time will tell, or will it?
Yeah.
So and Randy, I would like to expand on, the design professional's role, particularly from an ethical perspective. So where was that comment headed?
It's primarily the fact that both in terms of efficacy and whether the information we're getting is accurate, but also ethical in terms of guardrails of the particular tools you use. Some have higher guardrails than others, or more of them in better places. And again, without naming names of various tools, we all have our favorite go-to tools. all of that said, we still, as design professionals, have a responsibility. It's more ethical than legal, but it really is both. And, at the end of the day, we've all heard of these case studies where an attorney will cite six, cases to a judge only to learn that the cases that they cited were just fabricated by the AI. Similarly, we need to vet what we're doing. I am told by fellow academic professors all the time that if you ask AI to cite its sources, it will, but AI is a pleaser. It will cite sources, but again, even then, we don't know if those sources are real. So we always need, like a fact checker, need to have second or third ways to looking into things. So that's pretty much it. I just think at the end of the day, we are trained and we go through experience and we get licensed in order to have the final word on what goes out there into the world. And shame on us if we just let AI do all of that for us.
And I think part of that is, well, one, if you physically can't read the source or, can't go get the source content from, let's say a magazine and being able to order, an issue from 40 years ago, like if you can't verify it, well, that's an issue. But like you said, it's agency for the design professional to have the final say. And in some cases, some people say, I'm not going to use it. I don't like what it is. And I think that's your right as a professional. It's whatever you'd like to do. There may or may not be consequences to that, but only time is going to tell.
Yeah. And to that point, very quickly, one thing I love about the large language models is where you ask it for a list. So give me 10 ways that affordable housing can be located on a highway. So it's more affordable because the price of property will probably be lower, but you can find ways to mitigate the negative effects of both noise and fumes from the highway. It will list 10 ways to do that and make the project more affordable. All that said, immediately 3 of the 10 will be wrong. 2 of them you will have already known. And there might be between 3 and 5 really excellent items in there that you hadn't thought of before. So that's the other thing. You just don't use everything that throws your way any more than you would in a brainstorm session. It's up to us to be not, I hate this word that a lot of designers use, curating. It's not asking us to curate, it's asking us to edit. We're all really good editors, right? And people are throwing things our way, clients are, colleagues are, and yeah, we have to kind of sift through what comes our way and pick and choose which ones are going to be most effective over time.
And I think from the engineer's perspective, right, just being judicious about whatever's coming out of that thing and just using it responsibly.
Yep, exactly.
So then Randy, another topic I love to talk about is adoption. So as the technology, AI, continues to evolve, what are some of the biggest barriers to adoption AEC, and how can firms balance early adoption and all of the positive and negative things that come with it with long-term value creation?
So I'm not going to say anything new here at the beginning, because the AEC industry has always historically been slow to change. So the biggest barrier is convincing people, I think this is really important, that first of all, AI is not just another tool. It's not the next, a lot of people will just assume we had parametric tools or drafting tools and parametric tools and then computational tools. And now this is just the next thing. And I might be closer to retirement. So it's just one more tool I don't have to learn. And it's actually not the case at all. AI will find a way, and already has in many cases, to infuse itself into just about every situation, every profession in the industry. And so number one, we have to be open to it and find ways to leverage it. One of the beautiful things about AI is that everyone's heard about the 10,000 hour rule. In my experience and tested in this AI studio from last semester, it's 10 hours with AI, not 10,000. So we're not talking about five years of learning a new technology. Even Revit has a high threshold in terms of investment in time. I will admit, as an academic or researcher, somebody who leverages the tools, you can get burned out on it because it changes so frequently. Imagine a parametric tool like ArchiCAD or Revit, MicroStation, Vectorworks. changing on a weekly basis. Just going from the ribbon at the top to all different interface on a weekly basis. It would eventually just drain us of interest and energy. So we have to be very careful in terms of self-care. Maybe that's a term that's never been said on this podcast before. But I just think, with the rise of AI, it's really important to take a deep breath every Monday morning and say, the world's going to throw something unusual our way. But also I'd say there's a couple of other things to think about. Our plates are full. And so this idea of 10 hours of investment using Claude is appealing. But we're coming out of the pandemic, especially our current cohort, the Gen Zs and millennials are looking for work-life integration or work-life balance. Where I'm going with this is that we need to find shortcuts where we can integrate this into everything we're doing and not put it in the corner somewhere, whether it's the equivalent of like IT being in the corner or the research team being in the corner of somebody's office, and you may bring them into your project or you may not. It's literally going to be part of everything we do. And to the extent that we can step up right now and find ways, just download Claude for your phone and just use it use it in a way where it's like a go-to tool like Google search. You might use a couple hundred times a day. You just make it second nature. I think is probably the first thing, the best thing everybody can do.
And I think, and that probably becomes easier just because of the proliferation of all these companies and models out there where you can download your large language model of choice and just start using it like pretty much at the snap of a finger. And I think for the most part, the user interfaces are very intuitive, which makes use of it a lot easier. So Randy, and I also wanted to go back to the comment you made, because that's not one I hear often of. AI is not just another tool. And I think that, I think people can debate whether they agree with that or not, but I think you're one of the few saying it and really highlighting how powerful this technology is and how different it is. So I know to the audience, again, it's like Randy said, getting the reps in, using it and making the determination for yourself. Because I'm of the same mindset. I think it is easier to guide people along by just, comparing it to tools and the other tools that we've used in the past. But I agree. I don't think it does it justice once you understand what the technology is capable of.
Exactly.
So Randy, again, thank you so much for taking the time today. So my last question will be, what final piece of advice can you give to AEC professionals on developing the right mindset and practical steps to stay ahead of AI's impact on our industry?
So going back to what I said a few moments ago, that about agency, it's an unusual take, but my take is AI needs us. There's a lot of things AI does really well and will make us better versions of ourselves, but it needs us to have agency, not just in terms of oversight and the level of responsibility as design, engineering, and architecture professionals, but in other ways as well. So this may be unusual to hear as engineers, listeners, or viewers of this podcast, but I use an acronym, POETS, POETS, to actually remind myself daily of the things that AI does not do well and probably never will do well. Number one, the P stands for possibility. So one of the things we do really, really well as human beings is identify what's possible. So I think AI is incredible at identifying what's actual in terms of supply chain, in terms of the site, in terms of where a project's located, what's necessary to get a project done, and so on. But what it doesn't do is identify what's possible. The next thing, the O, is orchestrate. So AI will give you that list of 10 items, but you are the one who needs to kind of thread things together, create a narrative, a compelling story to sell it, and then actually find a way to implement it. So orchestrating is something historically we've always done. None of these words starting with POETS are new things. These are things we've always done. The E in POETS is empathize. There's a lot of people who don't use AI. There's a lot of recipients of the decisions we make as design professionals. To the extent we can take the this incredible information that AI will provide us with, and using metaphors, using analogies, help others along, holding their hand, so to speak. I think empathy is going to be a huge one. T is translating. It's similar to the empathy. It's finding ways to translate very complex ideas into ways that are implementable. And lastly, synthesize. AI, again, analyzes incredibly well, but it doesn't do a remarkably good job yet, and maybe never will, at putting it all together into something synthetic, something that is all of a piece, whether it becomes an artwork, whether it becomes something just seems inevitable or natural. And so I think those are going to be the areas where, from a mindset or attitude standpoint, where we should really focus. Because if we try to compete with AI, if we try to do better at it, I really don't think we're ever going to win that battle.
Randy, you pretty much read my mind. And I think to summarize what you said, it's working on the skills that AI is not good at, or is inherent to us as people, where we're not competing with, and I think in a losing race. So I would say, using the time that is freed up by AI and all these tools to work on the skills that are going to make us irreplaceable.
Great. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So Randy, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. If the listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach you if they want to ask you questions or follow up, maybe take one of your classes?
Sure. I don't know if you have show notes, but if you want to go to my website and just reach out through the contact link, it's just randydeutsch.com. Alternatively, rdeutsch@illinois.edu via email.
Wonderful. And we do actually have show notes, so those will be in there. And as I say at the end of every episode, Randy, thank you again so much for taking the time.
Thanks again, Nick, for having me on.
Absolutely. Till next time.
Take care.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.